Hello, welcome back to episode 4 of the Creative Practitioner podcast with me, Jonathan Curtis.
And me, Paul Hose.
Welcome back, Paul. We're discussing assessments today.
Yes.
And I want to really address two main areas, and we can diverge from there if we need to. I want to talk about the more philosophical place of assessments within the arts generally.
Yep.
And maybe tackle some of the specifics. We've got a few ideas written down in our notes here to do with the specifics of assessment, the types of assessment, how they work, and the connotations of those.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with the bigger of these two then, because this was a really interesting topic for me when we were working on this chapter of the book. And I personally think this is one of the strongest chapters in the book. We discuss assessment, specifically the difference between formative and summative assessments within the arts. But before we get into that, it always raises eyebrows. What do you think is the place and the value of assessments in the arts generally?
Well, in its most basic form, you self-assess at every point anyway of the process anyway. So let's take the performing side, and we are musicians, but let's talk about the broader performing arts. But,
sure.
But forgive me, I'll give a musical example. When you're learning when a person is learning a musical instrument, the instrument gives feedback.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah.
You know, violin, for example, will give you feedback immediately. The piano will give you feedback immediately because, and you don't need to have a trained ear. You will instinctively know if you've landed on a bum note.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
The same is true, I would suspect, of dance, where you can either, perform the choreography or not. Acting. You've done it or you haven't.
Yes.
Yeah, and these are really simplistic overviews, so forgive me. I'm probably on thin ice, but you take my point, right? So assessment occurs anyway. You assess yourself if you're having a good day or not.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Every practice session.
Yeah. So if you take that forward into the performing arts, we need feedback. We need to be able to self-assess. So when we're practicing at home or wherever we practice, it's like that was a good session. I'm making progress. Or that was a good session because it happened.
Yeah.
I made it.
We got it.
Yeah. I didn't let life get in the way.
Yeah.
So we do need assessment, and it can take many, many forms.
Does it need to be a dirty word in the arts?
No, I think people.
You understand why I say that, right? You know the sort of stigma I'm referring to.
Yeah, and that's why I took a deep breath when I tried, because I was thinking about how do I frame this.
Yeah.
If you take, let's say you have an adult learner.
Yeah.
Who quote unquote wants to just come along for fun.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, as a creative practitioner, choose that, navigate that relationship really carefully, because you will be assessing them. It's your job as a teacher to assess them.
Yeah.
They don't need to know that.
Yeah.
Unless they've asked for it.
Yeah.
They'll know anyway.
Yeah.
But if you remember in our previous episode, we were talking about the menu.
Yes.
If in the menu you're like, well, I will, you will get grades.
Yes.
Blah, blah, blah. Well, that might put as many people off as it attracts.
Yeah.
So it's not a dirty word, but yeah, I remember, we were talking about failures in teaching. I'll tell you a story.
The students that got away.
Yeah, I really regret this. I was teaching this chap, and he loved it. He loved playing the drums, and I was looking for wider repertoire.
Yeah.
So I chose a track from a graded syllabus just for him to play along with, and he fell out with me.
Right.
because he said, I've told you, and I'm really upset about this. Like, I don't want to do grades. And I had no intention of putting him in for a grade. I just wanted him
just
to play along.
Of a piece, right?
Yeah. Just like a 45-second, 60-second piece of music, just to facilitate the lesson.
Mm-hmm.
But because he knew it was from...
Why did that invoke such a hostile reaction?
I don't know. I remember being taken aback by it. Like, I didn't expect it. But you remember in the previous episode we were talking about how you prescribe.
Yes.
I thought, well, I just need a piece of music that facilitates what I'm doing, and I got a hostile response. And I'm not entirely like I maybe I didn't communicate what I was doing very well, or maybe I thought I didn't have to because I was just facilitating what I was doing.
Yeah.
But maybe it was the connotation. It had the awarding body's brand on the front, and it had, the fact that it was a lower grade for a beginner. And he was like, I don't want to do grades. I've told you. And I'm like, well, I know.
Yeah.
But
this is just a piece at the end of the day. It's a tool.
But it kind of it's an example that of the fact that assessment
can breed that stigma, can't
and it can frighten people.
Yeah, so it's interesting to gauge the attitudes from my students. For younger students, it goes one of two ways, or one of three ways. Let's say they either really, really want to do it. They want the grades. In a musical context, we take the grades generally. So they really want to do it. They want the certificates. They really enjoy the structure. They really enjoy the sense of progression, and it drives them to practice. Then you get the complete opposite end, who hate the very idea of assessment.
Yep.
Don't want anything to do with it, and are happy to learn, but really don't want to take a grade, don't want to be in the room with an examiner. And the very idea of it is antithesis. Excuse me, edit that out.
No, keep that in.
Keep that in. And then you get the middle ground who don't really care either way.
Yeah.
But they're the hardest in a way, because they're the sorts of students that will learn the material, and I would say to them, well, you know what? If you took it now, you'd pass it. You've done the work, and they just sort of shrug. And that's okay. I don't force the issue. But I always find it very interesting to gauge which way the students go with that one. Those that really want it, those that don't, and those that don't care. But I've had a few instances. I mentioned in the previous episode these specialist students, the visiting students. They're usually older, come to specialise. They know me from prior work and want to work with me specifically.
Yeah.
I've had more than one of them ask to, if not do the grades, work on graded material, because they feel they have missed out on some formal learning. Because they've never studied formally, they didn't do the grades when they were kids, they feel they are missing information. They feel there's gaps in their understanding. And I've had more than one go out, go and buy the books, ask me which ones they want and which ones to get, and buy the books, and we've actually started working through the grades. Whether or not they choose to sit the exam is up to them. But they are doing it because they have this perception of the grades, the perception of achieving the assessments and the qualifications, that will give them a broader base, stronger fundamentals, and they can be more assured in their own education that they've not missed something. Yeah, ironically, I've also had students come to me with very high grades who, when I've started talking to them and working with them, it's become very clear there are big gaps in their understanding. Yeah. You just roll your eyes there. You must see that all the time. So there's very much a double-edged sword, I think, when it comes to the perception, just to take the music grades as an example, but I think it must apply across the board with qualifications and assessment generally. Yeah. From those without them, there's a perception that those with them have a stronger sense of complete knowledge, a more comprehensive education. Yet for many, those with them have missed swathes of otherwise important fundamental things. To use a very specific drumming example, I've had students in here with grade 6 or grade 7 and they've not been able to tell me how a time signature works or what a paradiddle is. And yet I've got students who have never seen a graded book. They could tell me how any time signature works and demonstrate any rudiment I ask of them.
Yeah.
So there's no guarantee, is there? Either
No.
way, but there's certainly very strong perceptions. As I said, the most interesting one to me are those older students who have asked to go back and work on the grades because they feel it will fill in gaps in their own understanding, which I applaud. I think it will. But at the same time, someone coming to me with a grade X in no way guarantees they've got the complete body of understanding that would lead up to that grade.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've been furiously making notes to try and answer that, because you've hit on something that's an everyday occurrence, I would suspect. And I'll give some real life examples along the way with that. I want to take you back to your comment in the previous episode about lesson records.
Yes, keeping notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is formative feedback.
Right.
That is a record of what took place then and there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that. And and in there you might. I hope that you would use positive reinforcement in your language. So areas for improvement rather than
areas that were bad.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So you might say, today we did this. This was, commendable effort here. Let's look to improve this.
Let's focus on this.
Yeah. Yeah. So that culture might already exist. That feedback culture will already exist, I would hope, within the student-teacher relationship.
Right.
Right. And you need good rapport with the student. I think that, thinking about my example earlier about the person that didn't appreciate the repertoire that I chose, perhaps the rapport wasn't right, the trust wasn't right, the communication wasn't right.
Yeah.
Why? Because we don't have enough time. That brings me on to the argument about the grades.
Right.
We as private practitioners don't have enough time with our students.
Yeah.
We, for a large part, need to operate on a flipped learning model.
Mm-hmm.
So go away and learn this and then I'll review it with you.
Yes.
If we take grade 8 as an example, requisite level to an A level.
Yes.
Well, the knowledge from day 1 to grade 8 is cumulative.
Yeah.
So for a start, I would advocate that nobody miss grade 7
Yeah.
if grades are their path.
Yeah.
Don't do 5 and then jump to 8.
Yeah.
Because somebody cleverer than I has put a lot of good information in grade 6, 7, 7.
Right. They're there for a reason. They're stepping
there.
stones.
Yeah. So please don't miss out that. But if we accept that the grade 8 is requisite to an A level because Ofqual says so, then assuming that you have all the cumulative knowledge before you take that step into that zone, in every other scenario, we expect an A level to take 2 years.
Right.
So why should ours take any less?
Yeah.
Now, if we could have the communication and the rapport with either the student and or the person that pays for the student to turn up,
Yeah.
right? If we could agree that, then we could fill the gaps in knowledge, because what frustrates me, I know frustrates too big. What saddens me is when you've got a competent, teenager in front of you who might be grade 8, but actually all they've done is learn 3 pieces of music.
You just learn from the book.
Yeah. Whereas if we had that 2-year approach, because it's akin to an A level,
Yeah.
we could through academic rigor, i.e. the need to research, we could get them to research artists,
Yeah.
genres,
Subject knowledge.
yeah,
General
go
subject
to a
knowledge.
gig,
Yeah.
So I remember there was this young person that came to me, wanted to go to wanted to go on to a conservatoire, and had got grade 8, but actually there were just too many gaps in the information for this person. I recommended that this person didn't actually audition.
Right.
And they applied anyway and were not given an audition.
Right.
And that was heartbreaking for them, because they thought they'd done the right thing before, like, he came to me after he'd got grade 8, but was just not ready. I couldn't compute that. And that bring, there's a huge philosophical question in that. What is a grade? To me, as an assessor of grades, the published books that people buy, they are exam papers.
It's the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? It's just that top bit.
Yeah, it's what a person is being assessed against. It's not the breadth or the depth of the journey.
Yes, that process.
Yeah, yeah. And I had this chat with a really good drum teacher in London, who couldn't, he was like, well, they've got it wrong. They're not, they've not put all the rudiments in the book. And I'm like, well, they don't have to. It's not a curriculum.
Yes.
It's an assessment that they've chosen that they want.
It's the final exam, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
So bringing it all the way back round to real world, they're great pathways. People don't understand how broad these pathways are. They're incredible, but people just actually do what's in the book.
Yeah, and that's problematic, as I said, for my students who are waving around their certificate, but unfortunately did just do what was in the book. And then they're called out on something and they haven't got that knowledge.
Yeah, and then whose fault's that?
Right.
That's yours.
Exactly.
It's not theirs.
It makes me, it's problematic for everybody involved. And it's something I have to navigate with parents. Some parents, like students, are very pushy on the exams.
Yeah.
And I've had to ask many of them to take a step back for precisely what you just said. I've said grade 8 is a A-level. It takes time. And if they were to sit it now, they would not pass.
But it's the end of the journey.
It's the end of the journey. We're still doing that journey. Yeah. And I think I was talking to you before we started recording about one of my students who's a diploma student. He plays wonderfully, really technical, good player. And it's been suggested that he act as a dep for me on one of my shows. And if you look at the qualifications, he's qualified. But he's never set foot on a stage before. And the nature of the gig, the nature of the show he would be filling in for me, involves far more than just playing in odd time signatures and having fast hands. There's the responsibility of operating a backing track and playing to a click for the rest of the band that they don't hear. And there's no improvisation. You are playing a set length. You need to know where you are within it, and all of the responsibilities that you can't really teach in a practice room. You can only try to prepare for. And I agreed, and he has acquiesced, that having that as his first ever gig would not be conducive to anybody. It wouldn't be conducive to his own education. There's too much responsibility for the band and the audience, and for him, it just wouldn't be a good idea. So there are certainly things that graded assessments can't prepare you for, right? That level of experience. So where does the practical side of them begin, and where does the practical side of them end? They can only take you so far, or are they a complete education? Do you see what I mean? That I'm just trying to contextualize their value. They're
not a complete education.
They can't be, can they?
No, they can't be. Nothing can be.
No, it's too holistic for that.
Yeah. Your student wouldn't thank you for dropping them in the deep end.
No.
And it's important, isn't it, that we we don't put somebody off their hobby
Yes.
or an aspiring career.
Yes. Yeah. They may think it's a good opportunity.
Yeah.
When in fact it could be a trap.
So perhaps the open mic night might be a better start.
Right.
Right.
The school band night.
Yeah. But that's where your role as a teacher, or anyone's role as a teacher, actually comes to the fore, because it's not. And again, this is about your menu and the way you present yourself. It's not notes per minute.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm trying to teach you.
It's a bit more like mentorship, isn't it?
It is, especially at that level.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
grade 8 for me is the end of the beginning.
Yes.
Right. So, okay, now you can play a bit.
Yeah.
Now let's turn you into an artist.
Yes. And that's not, even the diplomas, we were talking about qualifications last time, that's still just one aspect of the journey, isn't it? You can get a diploma, even if it's a performance diploma, very young.
Yeah.
But without what did you say to me once? Come back to me when you've had 100 bad gigs.
Yeah.
And we can talk. You know, it's that experience that goes beyond just the exam and the paper, which is it's true of any path, isn't it? Whether you're an engineer or an architect or a doctor or anything, completing university is just the start. Then you need to go into a placement and your work experience.
Yeah, but nobody grows when life's easy.
No, it's trial by fire, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, regardless of the setting, you grow. You know, like it's easy to get along with someone
Until you fall out.
and that's the test.
That's the test, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's okay to disagree.
Yeah, but it's how you disagree as well, isn't
Yeah.
it? The manner of it.
Yeah.
And likewise, to bring it back to what we're talking to, the manner of how things go wrong and the manner of how you deal with it.
Yeah. And again, if you bring it round to MLC, which and this is on purpose, this is by design. We're a performance-based school,
Yeah.
not an exam-based school.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is a culture of chasing the grade.
Mm-hmm.
There is a culture of having the certificate on the wall, and they are things to be proud of. And they are individual choices. They can be quite daunting.
Yeah.
And that in itself, that sense of occasion of itself is good. It's good for us. Not receiving the mark that we had hoped for is good for us.
Yeah.
The feedback is positive. It's good for us. People don't accept that though. Often, not entirely.
It can be quite a blinkered approach, can't it?
But it's how you. There is a big pause there. I hope you keep that in. no, but it's all down to the menu, and it's all down to the charter. The way that you set yourself out as a creative practitioner is very important, and I'll tell you for why. Naturally, in any relationship, the relationship works best for me in any scenario when it's win-win.
Yeah.
Where it doesn't work is when there's a hierarchy. If you have a parent of a student come in and say, well, I want them to do the grades. Well, they might... I've had people come in and say, well, I'm learning piano, but I want to learn the drums. And it's like, well, why aren't you learning the drums? Well, because Mum wants me to learn the piano.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's just not going to work. That's just not going to work.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, it doesn't. And it puts people off music forever. Yeah. And it's a shame. You need the communication's the key. Good rapport is the key, and saying, well, look, we can look at grades, and we probably will, whether we sit them or not. We will certainly work within those parameters, those frameworks. But can we have some fun first? Can we participate first? Can we, nobody... this might not be true of classical musicians, I don't know. Classically trained people in the arts. If you think about... let's think about the rock musician. Yeah. Culturally, politically, they would have raged against the machine. Yeah. And now we offer them a certificate.
Now there's a rock certificate.
Right. Yeah. I personally didn't pick up drumsticks. I didn't even know exams existed. Like I wanted to be a rock star. I had a hero, and I wanted to be a rock star. Yeah. I don't know if that's the same in the classical arena. because some arenas, such as dance schools, let's say, that's part of their culture.
Yeah.
You know, you have the end of term show and you're assessed and you get your grade. That's when the assessors turn up. That's an interesting approach. In the environment where you've got a one-to-one practitioner where a person can phone you up today and they can start tomorrow, i.e. not in line with an academic year,
Yeah.
then the journey's individual, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's hard for you as a practitioner to manage because you might have, 20 students in one period doing exams and the 3 students in the next period doing exams, and they're all different. It would be much better if you perhaps structured it and just said, well, those that want to do exams, we work towards them. Then, otherwise you're managing lots of individual journeys on top of the learning journey. You've got the management side of it, which is, managing the expectations of the parents, and some people might just be like, well, that's fine. That's just what I do.
I mean, I keep coming back to this idea of it being blinkered. I was listening to what you were saying there, and I was thinking about some of my students in particular who are very grade focused.
Yeah.
They choose to. They love it, and it's great. It motivates them to practice. But it always throws them when I say something like, who are you listening to at the moment?
Yeah.
Who's your favourite drummer? Who's your favourite band? Just, again, sticking with music because it's what I know. And they can't answer. They couldn't even name a drummer.
No, I know. And the awarding bodies, they try very hard. They have these sections in their books where they have the walkthroughs and they talk about, this song's written in the style of and drawn from this album. Or if it's a published piece, there'll be a bit of background about the artist and the album. They try really hard. Nobody reads it.
I know. I was getting asked by... There's a student... we're working on a piece from the grade 3 syllabus at the moment, and it's grade 2 in fact, and it's an Aningo, right? Lovely 6/8 Aningo pattern, and it's a relatively simple piece. And she chose to do it. That's great. She chose that one. She likes it, and we're working on it. So for a couple of weeks now, we've been listening to Latin music in the Aningo style, and I've been getting her to play along to it. And I've had a few comments like, "We've not been working on the piece yet." I've sort of had to say, what do you think we've been doing? That's just one example of an Aningo. If you just learn this piece and then move on, it's been useless for you. I want you to come away from this understanding what an Aningo is, being able to hear one when you recognize it when you hear one, being able to join in with one. And I think this is where those students I mentioned at the beginning who have asked to go back to grades, I think this is the sort of thing they think, because some of these students have been playing in bands for years. They have tons of live experience, but couldn't tell you what an Aningo was, and certainly couldn't tell you why it's in 6/8.
Yeah.
So from their perspective, they're thinking, well, I've missed that. I need to go back and do it.
I think it's about... It is about communication, and it's about understanding the needs and wants of the student, managing their expectations, and there's no wrong answer, there's no wrong path, but there are easier paths depending on the individual. So, as an example, if a person really enjoys the chasing the next grade, that's fine, because there's still a journey to be undertaken there. You can't just do the thing. And you should, anyone listening to this should help their students understand that when the number of the grade increases, 5, 6, 7, 8, there should be a longer study period for each grade.
There's a lot more assumed knowledge going along with it, isn't there?
Yeah. However, within all of that, teachers ought to look at the syllabus, the technical documents that accompany the various published syllabi, because many of them cater for free choice pieces.
Yeah.
Which is really advantageous because you can build a set list that suits the student, rather than that comes. You could almost look at the repertoire in a grade book as indicative, like, you know, this has been written to facilitate this grade.
Yeah.
If then as a teacher we analysed it, we could then look at a wider repertoire that might suit the student. And the same would be true of dance, and of musical theatre, but equally there has to be a model, even if it's one that you create. It doesn't have to be, you know, that says, well, I'm here to teach you, I'm here to grow you as a musician or as a dancer or as an actor, and that journey takes as long as it takes.
So I suspect I know what you're going to say, but let me put you on the spot then. If a new music student came to you and they were very open, they was a complete beginner, and they said, or you had the conversation about grades, and they said, well, what do you think? Should I do them?
Being slightly argumentative, I don't wish to be, but what for?
Well, I guess I suspect your answer is something along the lines of, well, I'd need to get to know the student first. It's got to be tailored for them, hasn't it?
Yeah, but a question back to them.
As in, why do you feel you want to? Or
yeah.
Why
Why do you want to?
I see what you mean.
And it might be inevitable.
What if they reply with something like, doesn't that mean I'd be better at the end of it?
Then why can't you issue your own certificate? It doesn't have to be accredited by Ofqual, does it?
Yeah, I know. I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here to dig at this perception thing.
Yeah,
that I talked about earlier. You know,
and I think I am as well.
Yeah.
Let's paint a picture. Why do you offer grades?
Oh, there's a number of answers to that. I think from a practitioner perspective, the structure's good. It's always generally a surefire way to motivate a student. From a professional standpoint, I think it's an asset to be able to say, look, I offer these qualifications, I've got a proven track record, a success rate. If I can say I've never had a student fail an exam, that looks good for me. So there's the business aspect of it. I can put it as a badge of honor to say I offer these. They're recognized, right? People know them. Parents with no musical background still respect a grade 8, right?
Right.
For students who are older, who are not coming, you know, at the behest of their parents or something like that, I offer it as, if they are beginners, if they're complete beginners, I offer it as a tried and tested starting point. I think it's always good. Let me rephrase that. In my experience, when students have not shown any interest in the grades, or I haven't suggested it, I think there is the danger over a longer period to lose a bit of direction, because you maybe it's a shortcoming of mine, but you start to feel, well, the student's interested in this week, so let's explore this for a few weeks. And then the interest changes and we're exploring this now, and it's okay, it's all part of the journey. But I've found in my experience in the past, if you're not careful, that can become a little bit directionless.
So is there a case to be had that you could offer the pathway, the journey, but you don't necessarily need the summative assessment?
Absolutely. I don't necessarily equate the two. You know, I will say to many students who furrow their brow at the prospect of taking an exam, I say, we can work on the material, you need never sit the exam. That's a choice. So there is certainly a separation to be made between working on the syllabus. I don't want to call it a curriculum because it's not really, is it, as we said earlier, but working on the syllabus and doing the exam at the end of it. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think, you see, the grade is a very useful tool. It's a very useful part of education, whether it's in or out of school. It just is. It's very important. It's very useful, but it's not for everyone. And again, you know, the boards have come a long way. So for example, some teachers might argue, well, it's got that that conformity, and I'm straying away from music here. The same will be true of dance, musical theatre, all of the performing
bit of
arts.
standardisation, isn't it?
Standardisation is important.
Yeah.
However, and again, I will defend the awarding bodies here, but I'm challenging the teachers now. So, is it important to learn how to read music? Well, what if your student is blind? Is it important to learn scales and rudiments? Well, what if your student doesn't have mobility in both hands or doesn't have two hands? Is it important? Or is it important to teach them how to perform music or a performing art, whether it's dance, acting? What's more important?
So we're into the inclusiveness and inclusivity of the arts here, or
the individualistic journey, regardless of how inclusive it. Of course, it's inclusive. It must be inclusive. It's if we're having one-to-one lessons in any art form, why offer the grades if the grade doesn't suit the
individual?
Suit the individual.
I wonder if the inclusivity debate or the inclusivity line veers into musical elitism and exclusivity in the arts. We've used terms today like classically trained, classical musicians, rock musicians who just want to be rock stars.
Yeah.
I wonder if, rightly or wrongly, there's a sense of superiority inherent to formal settings and qualifications. And somebody, you use the example, it's an extreme example, but if someone happens to not have a left hand, let's say, for someone with two hands, just shrug and say, well, it's unfortunate, but I can play scales with two hands. There's an inherent bias towards standards, competency, as opposed to participation, which is one of the big talking points we've got on our lists here, and one of the big concepts you were keen to talk about in the book. We run the risk of getting too hung up on the competency side. How I mean, you can take the lead on this. I'm just posing some questions here, but do assessment-based models in the arts always lead towards a competency-first approach? Is that inherent? Does the graded approach in particular lend itself to that? Is participation, should that come first? These are all starting points for a very big discussion.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the grade in terms of its level. So 1 to 8.
Yeah.
By their design, they are incremental, aren't they?
Yes.
And they have to be a standardization of competency.
Yeah.
By their very nature of being.
Yes.
That's what they're there to do.
Yeah.
In terms of inclusivity, I can already hear the academic teams of various awarding bodies say, well, a person can do a performance certificate, so they don't have to worry about what's called the unseen tests. They don't have to worry about, because for a person to perform a piece of music in grade 5, they have to be of that level.
Yeah.
Now, my argument is if physically they can't, well, there ought to be a pathway for those people, and there is one, which is a journal-based, evidence-based,
sure,
about the growth of an artist rather than because also it caters for styles of performing arts, genres of performing arts that are new. So DJ or making music out of a box, or new performances with ensembles where members of the ensemble might be in a wheelchair. Does
that risk cheapening it? If I play devil's advocate here, if someone says, well, when I got my grade 8, I had to sight read this, and I had to play this really difficult rudimental study or scale study, And if we are catering to people who can't do those things, whether it's disability based or otherwise, does that not mean that the person that did have to do that is either having their achievement devalued or cheapened, or it cheapens what the other person has done? If they say, well, I've got a grade 8 as also, but I'm blind, so I didn't have to do the sight reading. Do you see what I mean here?
Yeah, I do. And I would say the answer to that is no.
Mm-hmm.
Because music has become very visual.
Yeah.
What's your left little finger doing?
Yeah, we're analysed to the nth degree.
Yeah, it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
What? If you look at the grading descriptors, you're being marked on, the command of the instrument, not your posture.
Mm.
You're being assessed on your internal pulse or your ability to synchronise your playing along to a backing track.
How do we translate this to something like dance then? Where something like posture would be important.
Well, but they would have a different set of parameters, of grade descriptors.
Right.
That would be standardised across their disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of cheapening it, no, it doesn't, because what's more important? Is it important that the music sounds good or that the dance looks good, or is it important that you read it or that you perform? It's not an Olympic sport, is it? It's an art.
Sure. I mean, this is. I know. I appreciate these are murky waters, and I'm kind of skirting the edge of this participation competency debate now. I'm still prodding this sense of, if somebody is a ballerina, and they're attending a dance school, and there's things about your toe position, and then there's somebody in a wheelchair who absolutely should enjoy ballet as much as anybody else.
Yeah.
With the nature of assessments, where the standards of the governing body, the standards of the school, the accountability of the teachers are at stake, and you're trying to maintain standards of the art form itself, whatever those standards mean, how do you rectify, I don't want to use the word justify, but how do you square these two circles where on the one hand you've got an able-bodied dancer who has taken great pains to make sure their toe position is quote-unquote correct, and on the other you've got a wheelchair-bound user who simply can't, but is just as dedicated and just has the same right to be there as anybody else? How does that get squared with an assessment that at both is inclusive but maintains the standards of a very specific art form?
So you would look at, you would either broaden the descriptors of which a person is assessed against, or create a pathway that would cater for a wider audience.
Yeah, okay.
So I'll give you an example. You can, let's use grade 5, just because it's in the middle. It's it's an important grade. You can assess a person on their ability to read, or you can assess that person on their ability to interpret the music.
Yeah.
To the level of the indicative repertoire that's presented. So you couldn't simplify it. You couldn't take all the meat away and then just present the bones of it.
Yeah.
However, more and more of the awarding bodies are trying to welcome more communities, more individuals into the performing arts, but into formal education. So they are devising pathways that enable people to participate.
Yeah.
And that's really important.
Of course.
So it doesn't. So it's not that it's not that it cheapens it or dilutes it. It actually the pool just gets bigger.
It enriches it as well.
It enriches it.
Because I mean, with the sight reading example, at the end of the day, sight reading's a tool, isn't it?
Yeah.
Reading music is a tool, and I suppose, I mean, I'm not I'm not educated on dancing, but if you take ballet, to use my previous example, if you take ballet as more an attitude, a way of dancing, a way of conceptualizing dancing, then in theory there's no reason why you shouldn't incorporate a wheelchair into that. It's just the parameters change.
Exactly.
You know, we're not interested in how a toe is pointed. That's just indicative of the attitude of control and beauty and grace.
I have no interest in where that toe is.
Right.
I'm looking at the bigger picture.
So if we were to see a ballet show that was entirely composed of wheelchair users, we would see the same degree of grace and beauty, just expressed in different ways, right? That wheelchair gets incorporated into the movement, into the art form. So I wonder if that's part of the solution here, as you said, broadening it and enriching it.
But I think they're already there. I think
that's interesting.
I think that the awarding bodies, you know, are already there.
Is that a relatively recent development, do you think?
Relatively recent, but not brand new.
Yeah.
Because if you look at there are the descriptors, there are certain things in the descriptors that you would expect to be there.
Yeah.
You know, how well can you stay in time with the music? Can you read the music? Are you reading the music, or have you opted to interpret the music?
Yeah.
But then it's the stylistic awareness. How aware are you of the genre that you're in? How good are you at communicating?
Are you just doing an impression, or do you understand the deeper meaning
now
of it?
that goes all the way back to the point you made earlier about, well, it's important that you listen to, you know,
examples of the music.
Yeah. Otherwise you're just skimming across the top like a stone.
Because it must happen in any art form. You know, I have students that don't listen to music. There must be people attending ballet schools that don't go to watch ballet, right? That must be super common. Especially, I understand young kids and things like that, but whatever the art form, eventually there's got to be a point where you're engaging with the art, right? Outside of the classroom.
We talk about this, you know, in the book. You know, we talk about. I don't know if you can remember, because we cover so much ground in that book. But
I think it's subject knowledge based, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's an area in which in the book that we talk about that by the time a person is a teenager and above, their access to the arts is diminished.
Right.
Because they're actually forming their own personalities, and they're off doing what they want to do.
Yeah.
Right? My argument would be that they are still accessing the arts, but it might be through a video game or through the cinema or through, you know, watching their favourite movie.
Yeah.
They're still accessing it.
Yeah.
I mean, like, if you take like the some of the Marvel films, you know, they've done so much good for like classic rock by, you know, you've got like movie heroes that are where their signature theme might be an AC/DC tune.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You know, and that makes that music relevant to a whole nother generation of people. Now they've obviously done that on purpose. These aren't happy accidents.
Yeah.
Right. But the arts should be for all of us. It should be for all of us.
So participation is a big deal for you, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I think you should participate. I think a person should participate and enjoy it. Assessment is inevitable, because you will assess yourself. Your teacher will assess you. Formal assessments from third parties, because that's what the grade is.
Yeah.
That is a choice. I think it's an important choice. I obviously advocate them because I assess them. I do believe in them, but I don't believe that it's the entirety of the individual's journey.
Sure. And as we've sort of said, this assessment-based approach need not be so competency-focused. It can cater to participation. Yeah,
and individual growth,
individualism.
You know, so that, you know, there's the Arts Award pathway, which is it's good. It's you know, you have to grow in your art form. So that makes the historical stuff worthwhile. You have to research artists. You have to participate as an audience member. You have to attend a concert, and then you have to share it with somebody else.
Yeah.
And that's and those 4 pillars are really attractive. Where the Arts Award falls down for me is that if you're over 25, you can't have an Arts Award.
Right.
Which is a real shame. If they're listening to this, maybe they can go away and fix that. But you know,
sure.
But
the grades can never be the whole story, can they? Assessment in any form can never be the whole story, because
no.
Stephen Hawking and I both have A-levels.
Well, yeah.
Right, but that doesn't tell any of the story as to our respective fields and expertise and knowledge base.
No.
Right? So if you've got 2 musicians or dancers or any artist, both have grade 8s, that can't tell a story. That can't tell much of a story, can it?
No, but it might facilitate another door opening.
Right, it might facilitate the next step of the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
And that's why they exist.
So they are
Absolutely.
pathways. That's ultimately
very valuable.
It is a path down through a treacherous journey.
Yeah,
it is one route.
Yeah, a very valuable pathway, and all of the awarding bodies are scrambling to modernise and to stay relevant and attractive.
You advocate early on in the book for youngsters especially to consider the formal pathways through qualification, because it's expected for any industry. Do you still feel that holds for aspiring professionals, musicians or otherwise? Is it a benefit to get yourself qualifications if you're looking to professionalise?
Yeah, it is. It is. But you have to take into account that not everyone has an equal start in life.
Sure.
Some young people aren't thinking about tomorrow because they're just trying to survive today.
Just trying to survive, yeah.
Now, what we can do within that is there are great organisations out there that facilitate pathways. They're cliches for a reason, but music. The performing arts. They can help. They can help change lives.
Yeah.
But they can help people. They can give people a voice that otherwise wouldn't have a voice, and the awarding bodies have got really clever with this, and a person can now receive an award, a qualification, even for a podcast.
Right.
Express yourself.
Caters to a lot more, doesn't it? Now?
Yeah, but receiving an award, a qualification, can really impact a young person. It can be a really important thing because it can give them a sense of self-worth, and that could mean very many things to many people. If some people are lucky enough to just have the support at home or the wider family, and that's the pathway they take.
Yeah.
But the youngster who is just trying to survive today, who hasn't got the scope to think about tomorrow, these awards can be critical, and that's where the arts, all of the performing arts, have a big role to play in participation, and then the competency bit can follow after that. When you've built the trust with a young person and they're clearly enjoying themselves, then whether it's a traditional pathway in the sense of there's an exam, or whether it's a pathway that's based on a journal or cumulative assessment of body presented,
which we call formative, right?
Yeah.
Over time with the teacher.
Yeah. But then it can then go away for third party assessment. That journal, that body of work can go away for a summative assessment.
Is there still place for both?
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember when we were working on that section, I think that's a particularly strong section, the formative, summative side of assessments. I was saying to you before we began, it seemed all the way through like formative is becoming a much stronger prospect until I got to the part where you talk about accountability and how summative assessments don't have to be about the student. They can be about accountability of the governing body, the syllabus, the student, the teacher, the school. I think that's a really important aspect. Qualifications and assessment can serve a purpose in maintaining quality for the education bodies, not the student.
Yeah.
And I think having read that and worked on that section with you, I'm not sure that point is strongly enough made these days or understood.
No, right? No, but it's shared success, isn't it? Or otherwise?
It's probably the otherwise that's more important. Because if I have one student that doesn't make an exam, that might be for any reason. They might have had a bad day, they might not have practiced enough, or I might have not communicated something clearly. If all of my students over a year don't make the exam, that's my fault.
Yeah.
And that's an important role for assessments to play. If all of my students are failing an exam, that's me. That's accountable to me and me only.
So whose fault is it then when you as the practitioner follow the published guidelines to the best of your ability, submit 4 or 5 people, and then you get massive disparity between the results? Whose fault is it then?
That has to be the governing body's fault. Because the first thing I think about when I read that is or listen to that is if I've done my best to read the guidelines and my students have done their best to do what I've asked them to do, the guidelines are insufficient.
Yeah.
The syllabus and the nature of what's expected has not been communicated enough.
Or communicated enough, but communicated. Often awarding bodies can use such technical language that it's actually difficult to understand what they're.
Well, let's flip that round. You invigilate diplomas, right?
Yeah.
What's the most common reason you won't pass someone?
Because they haven't read the question properly.
Right. So is there ever a sense, if you can put your objective hat on here, is there ever a sense where you feel the question wasn't clear enough? Or is it always the case that the student / teacher of that student?
There's 2 things in there. I mean, the first thing is that the awarding bodies work really hard, really hard,
right,
on this. However, the problem can occur is because the practitioner who is guiding the student through the pathway hasn't formalised their approach.
Yeah.
They don't know how to read the document.
So there's failings in a number of places down the line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Examiners, invigilators, they have to do standardisation training. You can't just
turn up and do it. Yeah.
And if you look at the outcomes, the learning outcomes of a unit within a diploma versus the assessing criteria, the piece submitted or whether it's written or performed either meets that criteria or it doesn't.
Yeah.
And borderlines are difficult. The easier ones are, sadly the candidate just hasn't submitted this part of the required evidence.
Right.
So it's a default unclassified.
It's just an insufficient submission.
Yeah. The other part though, which brings it back round to our academic rigour, is that, and this is the failing of the practitioner, is that people are looking at the diploma and just trying to answer a question. They're not going away and doing some research
or doing the journey.
Exactly.
And they're not taking the journey.
Exactly. And these diplomas, they have to, they're they have to stand for something. They have to stand for what they were designed to achieve. That's why, I mean, you know, we offer diplomas at MLC, and they're not cheap. They're not cheap. But the most expensive pathway is the performance pathway, because you have to work with an individual to turn them into an artist.
Yeah.
It's not grade 9.
Yes.
It's not that.
Yeah.
It's the first year of an undergraduate degree.
Yeah.
Or the third year of an undergraduate degree.
Depending on the diploma.
Depending on the diploma. So why would it be easy? Why would it be quick? Right?
Yeah.
It can't be.
Yeah.
It belittles all of it.
Yeah.
The ones that require research, the teaching pathway and the creative enterprise pathway, they're the ones that people fail the most because they're not undertaking the journey. And often the submissions that come in, not always, there are some wonderful submissions that come in, but sometimes people are just, it's just a bit bullet point.
Yeah, the academic rigor's maybe not there.
Yeah. But and that's why, if anyone's listening to this thinking about doing a teaching diploma, do it. But please seek out a practitioner who can help you, help guide you through it.
And I guess this brings us neatly back round to the whole idea of professionalisation as a practitioner. If somebody comes to me to do a qualification, they trust and expect that I'm capable of facilitating that. So whether they're paying for their 12-year-old daughter to do a grade 3, or they themselves are a 20-something doing a diploma, they're paying me good money on the assumption that I'm capable of doing that. Finally then, do I need a qualification in order to demonstrate that?
Yes. No, you don't need it, but I would advocate for it.
It can be beneficial.
Yeah, and it goes back. Do you remember we were talking about the menu in a previous episode?
Yeah.
Do you advocate that you can help someone exclusively with the graded pathways, or do you advocate that if you want, you can do a professional diploma? And if it's the latter, then please ensure you understand that.
Me having one is a pretty good seal of approval, right?
It's really beneficial to walk that journey, to take that journey, because even if you don't get the result that you think you deserve, you've actually got then the ultimate benchmark that says, blimey, that was more intense than I...
You've trodden the path and you've seen
trodden the path, and now you can better prepare your student and manage the expectation of the parent, because it won't be the same. Yeah. And that is an important part of being a creative practitioner, is that the person paying for the service might not be the person receiving it.
Sure, yeah.
And it's all about communication. All of it.
Last few episodes, we've been quite heavily into... obviously teaching, qualifications, professionalisation. Thinking we might take a bit of a turn next in the book. I think the next chapter's performance, isn't it? Facilitating and creating the arts. Yeah. The performance pathway itself in terms of diplomas and qualifications. Shall we make that our next topic for the next episode?
Let's do that.
Excellent. Well, I think this took some interesting turns, actually. There's some big topics in there.
Yeah, and let's revisit.
I think so. I found the assessment chapter fascinating to read and work on. I thought it was and it really made me think. It was one of the cases where I really went away and thought about it genuinely in my own time, thinking, what do I think about this?
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate that the awarding bodies, they provide some wonderful pathways, and they work very hard, and I would advocate that any teacher explore them all to find the pathway that best suits you and your student.
Yeah, there are lots. There's more out there than I realised.
And there's more out there that even the old guard are modernising. Yeah. Because they know they have to.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, Paul, thank you very much. The Creative Practitioner is out now, physically, digitally, worldwide. JonathanCurtis.co.uk for details.
paulhose.com.
See you there.
All
And
right.
I'll see you next time. We're going to be talking about performance, creating and contributing the arts, and the performance pathway. See you next time.
Thanks, Johnny.
On the Creative Practitioner.